Welcome to another Pcep Prep session. In this session, we're going to give you a few tips and tricks related to strings. Let's review some Python syntax rules. Practice makes perfect. In Python, names are case sensitive. This applies to not just variable names, but all identifiers. Let's jump into the terminal where we can drop down into the Python interpreter. And there are some reserved words that we cannot use for identifier names. Some of those would be like the while. So if I try to use while and assign that a value, we're going to get a syntax error. Now, it is important to understand Python is case sensitive. While with a capital W is different than while with a lowercase w. Now, while with a lowercase w is a reserved word. However, I can use while with a capital W and assign it a value, and it is a valid variable name. So I can now print the contents of what's in the while variable. In fact, I can use hex ID, those two built-in functions, on while and see the memory address that points to the value test in memory, right? So be very aware of this. There will be some type of trick question on the Pcep exam that's going to use a reserved word in some way, and you'll have to identify it. There may be a question something like, which one of these are valid variable names, or even valid identifier names? And you'll need to find, if you see while with a capital W, you know that it is valid. This goes for all reserved words. We can use, let's pick another one, like if. If is a reserved word, and we can't use if as a variable. However, we can use if with a capital I, and that works just fine. So be very aware of that. We don't need semicolons, and indentation matters. So as far as semicolons, if we jump back in here, we can use semicolons if we want. So I can create a variable if and use a semicolon and put another Python statement on the same line and hit enter, and that works just fine. Most of the time, Python programmers do not use semicolons because it just makes the program more readable. Remember your variable naming rules. Variables can start with a letter or an underscore. It can contain letters, underscores, and digits, but it cannot use any type of reserved word like if, for, while. Let's go ahead and jump in here. Now, if I try to start a variable name, we'll say one number equals 5, I am going to get a syntax error. So you might want to be aware of what type of error you get. So we get a syntax error, it doesn't understand one number. Now I can use number 1, and that works just fine, and I can print number 1 without issue. So variable names can include digits, numbers, but they cannot start with a number. So be aware of that. You will be able to use underscore, or you can use a letter to start your variable name. Of course, you can combine all three as long as it starts with a letter or underscore. So I can have letters, underscore, and numbers. Oops, let me assign that a value. And that works just fine. Strings can be created by using single, double, or triple quotes. Triple quotes preserve new lines and are used for multi-line strings. Now I can use triple double quotes or triple single quotes. Either one will create a multi-line string. Functions require parentheses. Print without the parentheses will refer to the class or the object. So if I print like that, you can see it points to this built-in function called print. Now if I print with parentheses, this calls the print function. And you can see it just prints a new line because the default end character for print is a new line character. I can also, inside the Python shell or interpreter here, I can just type print and hit enter, and it will also show me that reference to the function print. The len function in Python is used to determine the length of a string. I can use len. Let's create a string here. I'm going to call it string. And we can use the built-in function len to count the characters in the string. Now, len can be used on other objects. It can also be used on a list. This counts the number of elements in a list. When we want to combine literal strings, we use the plus symbol for string concatenation. So I have string. I can create string 2. And then I can concatenate string with string 2. And you can see it puts those two strings together. It's string concatenation. Now, it is important to understand you cannot concatenate strings with integers, floats, or bools. You'll get a type error. We have, let's create number equals 1, and let's concatenate string plus number. Notice that we get a type error, and we can only concatenate string to a string, not int. This goes for floats and booleans also. So I can have float's a key word, so we'll say number. That's a float. I can use the type built-in function to show you that that's a float. And we can try to concatenate string with number. And of course, we get a type error. And it says can only concatenate string to string, not float. If I want to do concatenation, I can cast the value to a string using str built-in function. So let's go ahead and try to concatenate number. I will wrap this in a string str call. This will cast number to a string, and now you can see that we are able to concatenate the number to the string. Now there's a better way to do this, and that's to use f strings or format strings. You can use single or double quotes to create strings. You can use double quotes to include single quotes, and you can use single quotes to include double quotes. Triple quotes are used for long text or both quote types, and they're multi-line. Remember, they preserve the new line. So if you want to remove the new line from a multi-line, you can use the strip function. Sometimes you'll need to include special characters inside a string, like an apostrophe inside another apostrophe limited string, or a quote inside a quote limited string. To do that safely, you use the backslash. Symbol is called the escape character because it changes the meaning of the character that follows it. We can see here a list of some of the common escapes, like if I want to display a backslash or an apostrophe or a double quote. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and create a string equal to, now using, I'm going to try to just use a single backslash. When I hit enter, we get a syntax error. That's because we have to escape this character because the backslash is the escape character and it's a special character. So if I use backslash and then I print string, we get the expected outcome. Let's go ahead and see how this would work with double quotes. So if I want to escape the double quote here, I can use the backslash. Now I'm going to get rid of the backslash, and you can see we get a syntax error here because the string ends here with the first double quote instead of displaying it or escape being escaped. So let's go ahead and add the backslash, and now we can print string, and that works just fine. A few common mistakes can easily trip up new Python programmers. First, using missing parentheses when calling functions. Print versus print with parentheses are different. If we jump back over here, we can say print, and that points to the function print, the built-in function. Now, when I call print with the parentheses, it actually calls the print function, and that displays a new line because that's the default end character for the print function. Concatenation needs string when you're using numbers, right? So I can concatenate strings, but I can't concatenate a string with a number. I have to cast that. Now remember, you're going to get a type error. It'll be good to memorize what type of error you get when you concatenate a string with a number. It's a type error, and you can only concatenate string to string, not string to int. Now I can easily fix this by casting the number to a number 5 to a string. I do that by calling the str built-in function. And that works just fine. Also, I can use type on str or just print str, and you can see that is the string class itself. Triple quote strings preserve new lines and indentation. If you want to get rid of the new lines, you can use the function for the string object called strip. That will strip off the new lines. More about that later on in the course. All right, you have all the knowledge you need to go ahead and take the Pcep Prep quiz number 3.